Welcome to the Career Transition Workshop. Session 9 is the second part of a three-part mini-series we began last time with Session 8, Interviewing Tactics. Interviews are where you pitch you as the person to fill the position. It is where you sell you. Learn how to answer the questions now we present in classy answers to classical questions. We're going to divide this session into three parts. Part 1 is be ready to respond. Here, our hope is that you learn to properly sequence your ears, brain, mouth to hear and think before speaking. Part 2 will be questions to answer. Here, our goal is to help you reflect on the motive behind the question, then learn how to be prepared to answer. And finally, part 3 is to help you with questions to ask, to always have questions to ask to demonstrate your interest and credentials. So let's begin with part 1, be ready to respond. The problem with answering questions is most people get the sequence wrong. They go ears first, mouth second, foot and mouth third. Our goal is to get your foot in the door, not in your mouth. Here's the right response sequence. Ears first, brain second, mouth third. I love the poem that John Jarman wrote. It goes like this. Oft in the stilly night air slumber's chain has bound me. I think of things I should have said when others were around me, and of such woeful waste of wit, constructively I weep, and often in the still of night, I kick myself to sleep. That's what happens when you get the sequence wrong. So let's begin with ears first. I want you to be able to hear, learn to listen, to learn. We rarely learn anything with our mouths open. We learn with our ears open. Solomon writes in Proverbs, let the wise listen and add to their learning. 7 times in the gospel, Jesus is recorded as saying, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Sometimes we're so anxious to respond, we fail to listen to learn. Fail to understand not just the question, but what's behind the question. Again, from Solomon in Proverbs, he says, he who gives an answer before he hears, it is folly, shame on him. Stephen Covey, in his best-selling book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, writes, understand to be understood. So ears first, brain second. Brain is all about thinking. Here we would ask you to question the question. Ask a why. Ask what's the motive behind the question. Why is this question being asked by this person at this time? What is the motive behind the question? And then clarify. Don't assume. If you don't know why, clarify. Would a clarifying question buy you a little bit more time to think or gain a little bit more understanding on what's the motive behind the question? For example, what if the interviewer asked you, what is your leadership style? Wouldn't it be better to find out what their definition of leadership is before you start to answer? Consequently, we're suggesting you don't assume. Assume. Put a dot on either side of the U, and that's what you become when you assume. By asking, you will have a clearer target and really more time to think. So ears first, brain second, mouth third. Here, speak with the be attitudes. There are 6 be attitudes. First, be you. Be yourself. Don't try to pretend that you're somebody else. Don't you want them to hire you? What would happen if they hired the person you were pretending to be? The easiest person to sell is you. Be you. Be ready. Anticipate questions. Rehearse answers. Practice, practice, practice. Answers should not be scripted. Make it real, not rote. Be ready. Be brief. La foto grande, the big picture. Give breadth before depth. Avoid overkill, because when you ramble, their thoughts will amble. We often suggest that people that are on phone interviews have a little egg timer so that they limit their responses to 3 minutes. Keep all the answers to 3 minutes. And when I'm talking about an egg timer, I'm talking about one of those things that the sand goes through, not a click, click, click one that rings. You got it. So be brief. Be honest. Your integrity is showing, so avoid truth decay. Tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, but avoid the god-awful truth. You don't have to volunteer anything that's not been asked. You see, lying puts the mistake in the future. The truth puts the mistake in the past. That's what Rick Pitino, former head coach of the Boston Celtics, once said. Mark Twain, though, said, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. I love that. But mostly, I love Scripture, which says in the Gospel of Luke, but there is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. So, be honest, and then be positive, or at least neutral. Give more good than bad. Find the heads up side of a coin. Any negative must be offset really with a positive. Imagine a ski slope where those great Olympic skiers take a ski jump. It starts heading down, 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 but then it sails up and launches the ski jumper into a positive direction. You can always find something positive to say about people. Be illustrative. Give examples that prove your point. Facts tell, stories sell. That is one of the reasons why Jesus, the master communicator, used parables to illustrate his points. Now let's talk a little bit about behavioral interviewing, communicating your competence. Before we address some of the classical questions, we need to underscore the be illustrative point we just made. How many of you believe that someone's future performance can be predicted by their past performance? That an applicant's past behavior in a specific situation is a good indicator of their future behavior in the same situation? Well, behavioral interviewing, also known as competence-based interviewing, is based upon this belief. There are 3 keys to successful behavioral interviewing from an employer's point of view. From an employer's point of view, not the interviewee, but the employer's point of view. It begins when the employer identifies the core competencies required or desired for the job. This is a challenging task which takes a lot of time to do it right. Typically, it is a collaborative effort between human resource professionals and the hiring authority. Problems arise when too many competencies are identified rather than the core, which leads to contradictory competencies like strategic thinker and hands-on tacticianer, or builder versus maintainer, or the reality that there may not be any candidate who is qualified with too many competencies. Problems also occur when only a standard handful of generic competencies are identified for all jobs, like leadership, decision-making, problem-solving. Because many companies choose not to devote the time to do the task well, they default to traditional interviewing questions and just simply a gut feel. Example of core competencies might include something like ability to deal with difficult people, ability to solve problems under stress, ability to manage contrarian decisions. Once core competencies have been identified, the employer can craft an opening question related to each core competency. During the interview, they will ask you to describe how you behaved in the past when you experienced a specific situation related to a core competencies. Examples of opening questions might be, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult colleague or customer. Or describe a high-pressure situation when you had to solve a critical problem with your team. Or give me an example when you had to stand up for a decision you made that was very unpopular. Notice the way these questions are being asked. They want you to be illustrative, to tell the story. As your answer unfolds, they will break it down by asking open-ended question after question to get to the heart of what matters most to them. We learned in Session 8, Interviewing Tactics, that open-ended questions are designed to get the person asked to talk. Questions typically begin with what, why, how, where, when, or who. Let's highlight a few of the why questions, which are all about your motives, the reasons and rationale behind your behavior. If the interviewer can understand your past motives, they will understand what might motivate you in similar situations in the future. So here's some examples. Why did you choose that specific action? Why did you think it was important? Why did you take that action rather than wait until a later time? Why did you think it was the right thing to do? Now let's consider how questions, which are all about your methods, how you approach a task or a challenge. If the interviewer can understand your past methods, they will understand how you might approach similar situations in the future. Here's some examples. How did you decide to do what you did? How did you involve others in the decision? How did you work with others who were not directly involved? How did you measure success? How did you communicate what you had done? How did you start? Now let's consider who questions, which are all about your relationship skills, your interpersonal skills, and skills of influence. Questions might be, who worked with you? Who played what roles? Who did you ask for advice? Who made a difference on your team? Who was the weakest link? Who did you keep in the loop? All of these questions are intermingled, asked to gain an understanding of the core competencies demonstrated by you as you experience a specific situation on which they are focusing. So the question is, how can you best prepare for behavioral interviews? First, begin where they begin. What are the core competencies required for the job? If you have held that position, you should know. Ask for a job description which might highlight the core competencies. Second, see how well your core competencies, which are strengths or attributes, align with the job requirements. It should be a pretty good match. In Session 3, 2-minute, 2-page resumes, we suggested you prepare an attribute achievement arsenal, which match your attributes, another word for core competencies, with achievements or stories proving your claims. So you are reasonably ready already. Simply think through your stories. Imagine all the questions that might pick apart your story. Team up with someone to practice, and you'll do fine. So let's move on to part 2. Questions to answer. Now let's shift our thinking from behavioral interview questions to more classical interviewing questions. Perhaps the most asked questions that is asked in an interview are, tell me about yourself. Second, What has caused you to leave? Why do you want to change jobs? Why are you presently seeking employment? Third, what are you looking for? What are your current career goals? How have your goals changed in the last few years? When someone asks us a question, we always want to think, what is the motive? Why is this question being asked at this time? So why would people ask these questions? Why do they want to get to know you? Well, one answer behind the motive is they may have a genuine interest in who you are and in what you've done. But another motive is that they may be digging for dirt. They may want to look for some reason to knock you out. Remember, as a general rule, recruiters are trying to get you in while hiring authorities are trying to find a reason to knock you out. Find the quick no, because typically the last one standing wins the job. Another motive may be measuring how well you communicate, verbally and non-verbally. And a final motive may be to measure overall goodness of fit, how well your past performance and personality fits their needs. So we know the question, we know the motive. What tactic should we use? The tactic we recommend to answer all these questions would be the 2-minute resume, which we presented in session 3, 2-minute, 2-page resume. The full 2-minute resume, spoken naturally, answers the first question, tell me about yourself. The transitional statement in a 2-page resume answers the second set of questions, what caused you to leave? And the focal point in a 2-minute resume answers the third set of questions, what are you looking for?